It spins and spins, and then you think it's connected. Everybody, this is Everett with Ohio for Freedom, and you are tuned in to the Ohio for Freedom podcast. I'm coming to you live from Blackwall Studios, the north side of Cincinnati, Butler County, actually. And hopefully, this is the third and last time for today, which is the 5th of July in the year of our Lord 2021. There was an attempt to put together the presentation that I am going to go through. I'm committed to go through at 9 o'clock Eastern. Same setup, same cameras, same microphones, same computers, same everything. And the live stream fell out in the middle. And so that just happens sometimes. But there is a topic that I'm going to talk about. It's a continuation of a topic that I began to address a couple of days ago. And it does deal with our neighbors to the north, the nation of Canada. And it does involve residential schools, and it does involve Indigenous people, and it does involve the Catholic Church, and it does involve what seems to be cover up of issues, or at least a complete unwillingness to address such issues. And so we're going to talk about that some more in detail. The reason you see this picture on the screen is when I brought this subject up a couple of days ago, I said, I am not this lady. I am not Rachel Dolezal. Rachel Dolezal is a lady that was found out to be a fraud a couple of years ago when she's actually white, completely white. She has sandy blonde hair rather, and had decided to disguise her appearance and dyed her hair, went around with a permanent perm, had a permanent spray tan, and managed to secure Kathy. I'm almost afraid to say hello, but hi there. And anyway, she was found out to be a fraud. She was pretending to be black when she wasn't black, and got a job as a professor being black, and she's a complete and total fraud. I am not a Canadian poser. I have not gotten a Canadian spray tan. I've not dyed my hair Canadian. I did say in my first attempt here, I do have Canadian roots. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother were Canadian, period. My grandfather was born in Ontario, Canada, came to Munising, Michigan when he was 7. All my life, I've had Sister Dorothea, was my father's aunt, was a Catholic nun in Canada, but then later in her career spent some time, I believe, in Minnesota. And so some of this will come out. So I'm not a Canadian poser. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Kat. Maybe it's the subject matter. So speaking of subject matter, after I say, please like, please share, please subscribe. Please go to, if you're on Facebook, please find Ohio for Freedom and like it and follow it, because Zuckerberg hates it when you do that. And the things that I just mentioned are the only ways that we have to combat the ever diligent effort of the relentless bots of censorship arrayed against every freedom platform. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about residential schools, and I'm going to play a clip in just a moment, and I'm going to try to obey one of my critics and play the clip and then talk, play the clip and then talk. I will just sort of set it up this way. If for the average American, it probably completely escaped your attention that within the last 7 to 10 days, there has been an acknowledgement of a mass grave of 751 is the number that was shown. Bodies at a mass grave that was related to a residential school that was overseen by the Catholic Church. And I previously played the clip of Chief Bobby Cameron, if I'm recalling his name correctly, very graciously saying that the Catholic Church needs to step forward and be part of the healing process. But he also said that people need to be held accountable. And our last episode, which was kind of a go figure for an old gray-haired white guy in America talking about these Canadian issues, but we also played the clips of Justin Trudeau just totally doing a bob and weave and being completely unwilling to address what was going on. So that being said, I will tell you that if I was the average American, I was completely wrong. Because if you thought this was a one-time occurrence or just a one-time blip on the radar, wrong. So I'm going to play just about a minute clip. And folks, you Canadian folks know there are hours and hours of this stuff available. But let's play it and then we'll talk about it.
It was called St. Anne's, funded by the government and for decades administered by the Catholic orders of the Oblates and the Grey Nuns. Generations of children from remote James Bay communities were forced to attend the school. Running away was not uncommon.
The three boys ran away from the school one night in early to mid-April, and it was determined that the boys had tried to cross the river late at night to get to the other side, and in doing so, there was a breakup of ice at that time, and that they were likely washed out to sea.
That is the 70-year-old official story, but Cree elder Ed Matatawaban says a community story handed down through generations is that the three boys returned to the school and were punished to death.
It has to be looked at. It has to be investigated. The boys didn't die in the bush. They died under custody.
The charge is really that people at the school, people associated with the church, murdered three boys.
Almost done with the clip.
Is that conceivable to you?
Oh, yeah. The people that have received physical punishment, they know it's conceivable. So that's not beyond belief for us.
That's not unbelief beyond belief for us. Now, folks, if you do any, and I know that we got several groups of people here, but if you do any amount of investigating, thanks to all the individuals who sent me clips, but really you just take one clip and it just starts an endless trail of stories and articles and videos. And what's really weird is that a lot of the videos that you'll see are so well done, and they've got such impactful information, and you see just a few hundred views. So in other words, a lot of people know about this, but a lot of people don't know about this, and it's crazy. But the abuse, and you hear stories of children that were subjected to electric chairs. I don't mean the ones that'll kill you, but I mean the ones that'll certainly punish you. And you hear about kids that were routinely beaten with mini cat o' nine tails. And I mean, the stories just go on and on and on. And I'm reminded of a term that I learned in the last year from Glenn Beck, and it's called normalcy bias. He said we have a normalcy bias. We have a tendency, because most of us are not psychopaths, we're not sociopaths. You know, we're not genocidal. We're not like that. And so when we hear of things that are just off the chart, we tend to like, no, that can't be, that can't be, that can't be, that can't be. But ladies and gentlemen, when you go through the body of evidence and testimony that's out there, it's just overwhelming. So I'm going to dive into, so I played that clip just to kind of set the stage. But the fact of the matter is, I could have played hours and hours of clips like that. I could have talked about young, elder indigenous men in their 70s talking about when they were 8, 9, 10 years of old, routinely subject to sexual abuse, routinely subjected to all types of abuse, trying to run away, kids that die in the process. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'm not going to get buried in the details because I really want to concentrate really on a few things. And so just so I'm not guilty of teasing to the end, here's a big takeaway. Let's just kind of do it in no certain order. There's a lot of this stuff that has happened. Lot of people, maybe everybody knows that this stuff has happened. How about number 3? Nobody's ever been held accountable for it. No, show me one person that's been charged. So those are some of the big things we're gonna pursue. So we're gonna move into, this is real touchy. And you know, my normalcy bias would say, oh, this can't be. Oh, this can't be. I'm gonna play the clip and then we'll talk about it.
In mid-October of 1964, kissing cousins Elizabeth and Philip paid a royal visit to a Catholic residential school for Aboriginal children in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. William Coombs was 12 years old at the time of the royal visit. I was an inmate at the Kamloops school when we were visited, said Coombs. I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them, and the school principal told us it was the Queen, and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived. The day the Queen got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband and some of the priests. We went down to a meadow near Dead Man's Creek. I remember it was weird because we all had to bend down and kiss her foot, and she was wearing a white lace boot. After a while, I saw the Queen and her husband leave the picnic with 10 children from the school, and those kids never returned. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again. We never heard anything more about them, and we never met them again, even when we were older.
Okay, that story. Is that beyond the realm of possibility? Look, I'll just get my bias out of the way. I have always found the whole thing with the Queen, I find it incredibly creepy. It has always creeped me out. Now, I'm going to get with our subject matter, but for all my critics out there, my brain works the way or doesn't work the way that it does. I remember in the 90s, I led a mission team of about 15 college students to the island, to the United Kingdom, to England. We had a great mission trip, and I won't go into the details of that, but we had a great mission trip. But I remember reading in a London newspaper, and the gist of the article was just so happy that somebody was running for the House of Lords or something, whatever title you would put on it. It'd be like some equivalent to one of our United States congressmen. And they were so excited because a previous failed experiment had been tried, because the guy that failed was not of noble birth. And the person that was running, that this writer was excited about, was of noble birth. I can't think of anything more disgusting than the concept of noble birth. And by extension, I'm just telling you my bias. I do not understand. I do not understand this affinity with the Queen. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. Her bathroom is just as unpleasant to walk in after. Well, never mind. I don't understand it. Is this possible? Is this possible? Well, that William Coombs, that was became, you might say, a whistleblower to this instance, was telling the story about these 10 kids that just disappeared after his visit. Evidently, in 2011, he was going to appear in the UK and give some testimony, and then he strangely fell ill. And you judge for yourself if this lady who was interviewed as one of his direct care nurses, you judge her to be critical, whether she be credible or not. And this clip is a little bit longer. I'm going to let it play and let your credibility radar go to work. Here we go.
I'm here with Erica, a former nurse at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. And we're talking about William Arnold Coombs, who died in February 2011. And you were part of the treatment of William. At the time, I guess you didn't know that he had been an eyewitness to the abduction of 10 children by Queen Elizabeth from a residential school in October 1964. And he had gone public and talked about that. He was on the verge of being invited over to England when he died. And so we want to talk a little bit about your experience with William.
No, I wasn't aware of that, but I knew there was something up when I arrived for these constant care shifts, which is basically one-on-one LPN to one patient, which is usually only done if there's like very specific needs with that person. I found out when I arrived that when the CNL came up, she told me that they are identity protected, so I knew that there was something up immediately. The name on the chart was Ernie Coombs, which kind of made me laugh because that's Mr. Dressup's name, but...
it was also the name of his dead brother who died in a residential school.
Yeah, that's what you told me when I first spoke with you, and that's kind of very mean for me to have us call him that.
Okay, so that is a nurse who was one of the direct care nurses. She said in that interview, which is about 12 minutes long, that she did 4 different shifts while this gentleman was there. This gentleman that was a whistleblower, you could say it, or just an eyewitness. He was willing to tell what his version of what happened back in 1964 when the Queen and her cousin went on a picnic and 10 indigenous children disappeared and never came back. This gentleman, William Coombs, was in the hospital under suspicious looking circumstance. You just heard her say that they treated him as though his identity was secret. Now, I would love it if any of you nurses out there would go through this, because she talks about protocols, and the coroner ruled that he died of tuberculosis, but all the while that he was in the hospital. They did nothing that would be in line with treating someone that was in the hospital. They never put him on an IV. She describes in that interview, which my bias is I find her to be completely credible, but she describes what she felt looked like arsenic poisoning. But I'm going to keep this rolling by going to the next clip, because they called her into a meeting and she had concerns, and this is longer also, but I'm going to let it play. And then Tricia, I do want to get to your comment about what's going on up there in Urbana. I appreciate you leaving that, but I'm going to play this clip, then we're going to talk about it.
And then tell us about the meeting you were called into.
Yeah, the CNL came up to me and when I was charting at the end of the midway through the shift, not at the end of the shift. And by the end of the shift, I was to go to a meeting regarding Ernie William, and she didn't tell me that much about it. I had assumed it was a family meeting. She did come and knock on the door to tell me when they were ready, and she brought me to the little office, and there was 3 chairs with 3 people sitting there, and none of them looked native, none were family. And I sat down. One woman in the room had a St. Paul's badge. The other 2 had no badges whatsoever. I had never seen them before. The 2 men were, middle-aged. One was a Caucasian with very graying hair and sort of like gaunt, pale skin, as if he'd been under fluorescent lights way too long. And
now I'm going to let this clip play in its entirety, and it's kind of lengthy, but I'm just going to ask you, if you're with me, I'm going to ask you this question. Are you listening to an actress? Is this lady on the screen right now? Is this an actress? Is this somebody trying to portray a nurse that's giving an interview, or is this a real person? I don't know. She kind of looks like a real.
The other fellow was very northern native BC looking, very Asiatic eyes, big bushy eyebrows, thick, wavy, dark hair with graying on the temples. He stared at me intensely the whole meeting. They asked me very pointed questions that were also they didn't fit with a hospital care planning meeting.
Like what questions?
They asked me what he'd been saying. And I had been involved with patients that were under observation for non-consensual admission before, and
I just got to comment on that. This is a guy that has been invited to go to England and testify. He's all of a sudden hospitalized with a mysterious illness. His identity is like in question to the people around there. And then she's called into this special meeting with people that aren't wearing badges. They don't even look like hospital people. At least several of them don't. And it's not a family meeting, because this gentleman is an Indigenous Canadian and there's nobody that looks like his family there. But one of the questions is, what has he been saying? And once again, is this lady an actress? If you think she's an actress, please type yes in the comments. If you think she's not an actress, please stop. No, she's not coming across to me as an actress.
I think I reacted from fear of, I didn't want to answer this question. I asked them why he didn't have an IV, why he wasn't on antibiotics. That was my response. And that's when the native looking man just, what's his mental status? He barked out at me. And I didn't like the look of him. He actually kind of scared me. But I said, I don't know. Why don't you have a psych consult come in?
Why do you think he asked about his mental status?
Well, that's in Canada, you need 3 doctors to sign off on you to basically be non-consensually admitted to a psych unit or have all your rights taken away, have anything done to you medically.
Including have your life support terminated?
If that's what they did, yeah, you could do that. Usually that's reserved for people who don't have any family, but yes, they could do that.
Because
Well, what that interviewer went on to say was that's exactly what happened. That little group of people, if I'm hearing it right, you know, I'm not perfect, but if I believe that what he's saying is that he was taken off life support. So he's a witness that's on his way to England. He's been invited to go to England. He mysteriously shows up at the hospital. The coroner's report, and I could play you if I let that clip play. He asked her, do you doubt the, basically she says the coroner's report is no way near what really was going on with that man. They didn't treat him right or treat him properly according to what they were alleging. And there was this mysterious meeting, and she didn't even know that later they pulled the plug on him. So anyway, I want to keep rolling, but I just ask you the question, is it beyond the realm of feasibility that the Queen could be involved in something like this? And if so, why? I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying I don't know, but I tell you what, that nurse is either the best actress I've ever seen, or she really believes what she really is a nurse, and she really believes what she's talking about. I want to keep this moving because eventually I want to tie this back into the United States, and I'm not in a hurry. We're just going to hear anyway. Here's
Pour lui, c'était comme faire son acte de contrition, je sais pas là.
Father Harvey claimed his superiors not only knew of his serial child abuse, but they covered up his crimes.
Il dit, tout le monde le savait, ben, il n'y aurait jamais eu toutes ces victimes-là. On m'avait stoppé.
But if the higher-ups knew, as he claims, why wasn't anyone else charged in his case? More than that, why is it we can't find one case anywhere in Canada where a church superior has been charged in connection to crimes committed by abusive priests?
There just isn't a culture in our criminal justice system in Canada to look that one level up. You know, we've got it when it comes to drug dealers. We're not just clearing the street level, we're going higher. But we don't get it when it comes to the sex offenders. We're just clearing the street level offenders, the priests. We're not going higher.
What do you think about what that gentleman just said? Because, and I'm just asking you, has there been one prosecution? Has there been one conviction? Can you give me one name? And it's a big problem here in the United States as well. I don't have time to include it. This little trail led me on a prosecutor in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that went after the Catholic Church there for 5 years. And the culture is you don't touch the Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to say something about the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is not above being questioned. Every once in a while, I'll get a comment that seems to say, now you can't paint the Catholic Church with a broad brush. I'm not painting the Catholic Church with a broad brush. My aunt, Sister Dorothea, she wasn't like this. Okay. My uncle, I have an uncle that being in education, he's from Wisconsin, don't you know? And at the end of his career, he went and got 2 or 3 years worth of schooling so that he and his wife could be basically the equivalent of a pastor in Catholic parishes extremely north in Wisconsin to serve a need. And he was asked to by the bishop. But I guarantee you one thing, my uncle wouldn't go for this. My uncle would not want it to be covered up. And so, once again, the issue is, why hasn't there been one prosecution of one pedophile priest, abusive nun, whatever, not only related to these residential schools, but just in general? Why hasn't there been? I'm going to let the video order keep the timetable here. This is going back about 3 years. I'll play the clip and let it speak for itself.
Children at St. Anne's Residential School suffered nightmarish levels of abuse, torture, and child rape, and yet the Office of the Attorney General suppressed thousands of pages of police evidence that identified those perpetrators, and in doing so, they had cases thrown out and undermined the hearings. And now that the Justice Department has been forced to turn over those documents, they claim it's inadmissible unless a survivor finds a witness to verify these atrocities. To the Prime Minister, enough. The survivors of St. Anne's deserve better. Will he instruct his government to end this obstruction of justice against the survivors of St. Anne's once and for all?
Now, that's a pretty good question that he just asked. He's being pretty direct and he's passionate. Will you instruct them to basically deal with this once and for all? And I want you to see a master Marxist once again in action. His name is Justin Trudeau.
Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the ills done to Indigenous people over decades and centuries of colonialism in this country are shameful and are something that we need to learn from and move forward on. That includes respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples now in all their different aspects, and that's why we are working with survivors, working with communities to ensure that we can move forward in a way that is fully respectful of all their rights as we get to the bottom of this, understand their history, and make reparations in the right way moving forward.
Well, there you have it. That's, again, a bob and weave. Everybody's guilty. Everybody's responsible, which means that nobody's responsible. And he says he wants to move forward. I'll tell you what they're trying to do, folks, is they're trying to wait it out, because you're gonna learn that you heard the previous gentleman say that when they were forced to look into certain evidence, now the position of the Justice Department is saying, unless you have somebody to collaborate this evidence, you can't even bring it forward. What they're wanting to do is wait till every victim dies out. They won't deal with it. I want to keep this rolling here. I know this is a strange subject for an old gray-haired white guy, American, to be talking about, but I'm going to do that. And so I want you now, unless you speak French, which I don't, you'll have to read the subtitles, but listen to the same kind of answer coming from this Labelle is the last name.
Even today, to call to account a bishop in the criminal courts requires a slight paradigm shift among the people who have the authority to take those proceedings.
In Quebec alone, our colleagues at the program Enquête have compiled a list of 25 class action suits involving some 200 abusive clergy members and 3,000 alleged victims, but not one charge against anyone in the church hierarchy. Quebec's Justice Minister declined an interview to explain why her department has never pressed charges against church superiors, and she has refused calls for a public inquiry into abusive priests.
Personne ne met en doute qu'il y a eu des prêtres pédophiles. Personne ne met en doute présentement la parole de ces gens-là qui s'expriment. Donc la situation, elle est connue. Moi, je préfère, pour l'instant, travailler sur des situations pour aider justement ces gens-là, les aider à dénoncer, les accompagner.
Okay, I am going to attempt to back this up and read her answer if I can do this. Listen to her answer. Come on. Okay, this might work. Nobody doubts there have been pedophile priests. That's what she says. Nobody doubts there have been pedophile priests. The situation is well known, but I prefer to work on situations to help them speak out and support them along the way. This is some of the most masterful Marxism that I've ever seen. She's not helping anybody. Everybody knows about it, so we want to help people talk about it. And the way we help people talk about it is we don't let them talk about it. And we keep it covered up and we keep it suppressed and we won't let you look at files. And here's just the bottom line. Everybody knows, okay, Ms. Labelle, if everybody knows, here's one thing, here's one question for you. Why hasn't anybody gone to jail? Why hasn't anybody gone to jail? It's because, and if I was in your country, I would tell you this. It's because you're corrupt. It's because you are corrupt. You are covering something up. You're doing something evil. You are evil. And you are covering this up. Somebody said in a comment, a lot of this stuff went on while his father was prime minister. He's not going to do anything that brings any of that to light. That's a really, really good point. But in all of Canada, why is it that not one, several of these news agencies said the same thing. They had done these deep dive documentaries. They couldn't find one case that had been prosecuted, let alone brought about a conviction. Now, you know what these people remind me of? I'll show you what these people remind me of, lest you think it's just some American guy bashing on Canada. No, I'll show you. This hits close to home. I'll show you who it reminds me of. I'm going to play the clip.
Why didn't Kamala Harris prosecute abusive priests? It is a troubling part of her resume. Perhaps the deepest and most troubling mystery of Kamala Harris's tenure as a prosecutor centers on the disturbing issue of sexual abuse of children by priests, writes Peter Schweitzer in Profiles in Corruption. During her decade-and-a-half tenure as a chief prosecutor, Harris would fail to prosecute a single case of priest abuse, and her office would strangely hide vital records on abuses that had occurred despite the protests of victim groups. As a senator, Harris has inveighed against those who protect predators. So what explains her soft on abuse record as District Attorney of San Francisco and Attorney General of California?
There you have it. There you have it. I wanted to show you that. Kamala Harris, from the Pretender in Chief's second, all right? You know, the one that cackles, I call him Cackling Kama, and she loves to do this thing with her thumb. I guess that makes you feel, I guess you're really smart if you do this with your thumb, really through your thumb. Okay, so Cackling Kamala, who was Attorney General in California for, they just said, a decade and a half, she came into office, and there were so many political favors that got her there. We don't have time to get into that, but there were thick files of evidence and thick files of the goods to nail numerous Catholic pedophile sicko priests that her predecessor had worked on for years. And this was during a time where these cases were happening all over the country here in the United States. And what did Cackling Kamala do with it? She deep-sixed them all. She refused to prosecute any of them. She just ignored the files, didn't prosecute. So lest anybody think I'm just, looking down my nose at our neighbors to the north in Canada. No. I'm saying this is all pervasive. And isn't it true that since all of this started, and a lot of us have started looking, digging, isn't it alarming, the information that we've been finding, or at least hearing, or it looks like, about child abuse and sex trafficking and child trafficking and human trafficking? And you know what? It starts to look a whole lot more believable when you start to connect a lot of these dots. And so it may seem like not a completely logical segue, but I did want to go one other place before I conclude this. And but before I do that, I do want to, I was looking at this comment, and I want to talk about this mother from, I got to go back 4. We've got school kids in Urbana. Listen, folks, for y'all that aren't aware of Urbana, Ohio, Urbana is about as mid-south, or Midwest, small town, nice, happy, Mayberry-ish small town as it gets. And they're letting gender-confused males walk into the girls' bathroom. Folks, that is sick. That is sick. Man, when I was a teenager, man, I'd have made myself gender-confused if I could walk. I mean, I'm just kidding there. But what I'm saying is, that is sick. That is sick, and we'll try to pick that up in another episode. But I mentioned the other day about these land acknowledgments, And I think I can bring all this in for a landing. And thank you to everybody's born with me. But this is Deb Haaland, our new, I believe, Secretary of the Interior. I'm going to play the clip and then we're going to wrap this up.
Today we come to you from Washington, D.C., which is the indigenous homelands of the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, Piscataway people. We acknowledge the legacy of this land's original inhabitants and find inspiration from the lands and the waters. We recognize that our country was built on indigenous land, and we pay tribute to the indigenous nations who have stewarded these lands, these waters, and animals for centuries, and who have made great sacrifices in the building of our country. And now I would like to introduce Claudette White of the Katsan tribe.
I'm going to pause that right there. Okay, so the reason that I played that is this whole thing about land acknowledgements and an UNDRIP, which we're going to talk about in the future. And I've reached out to some people that I'm trying to bring on the program, have me talk about it. What I want to say, it is so disingenuous. First of all, it's a UN remedy to not a real problem. But anytime the UN is presenting an answer, it's the wrong answer. But this lady here is such a moron. And when she's talking about the ancestral lands. Well, and a little bit earlier in that same interview, she is saying that we shouldn't have a border, that's wrong. Okay, so you want to protect people's lands, and you want to respect people having, attachment and ownership to the lands, but you want to bring in people that have no attachment to the land. It's just, and you'll notice that here in the United States, where this is begin to happen, where they're doing these land acknowledgements, what's the very next thing they say? And they say, and my pronouns are sick, twisted, and perverted. Okay, they don't say it in that way, but it's that self-congratulatory, I'm cooler than you, woker than you, more modern than you. And what is it all about, folks? It's not about meeting. It's not about addressing any injustice. It's about societal upheaval. Let me tell you something. There will never be, as a result of UNDRIP, there will never be anybody if anybody gains from that, it's going to be two people. It's going to be the globalists, and it's going to be the one or two sellouts that enrich themselves at everybody else's expense. I hope you're following me. Good example. It's going to be another Patricia Cullors, who was the co-founder of BLM, who is on record as saying we are trained Marxists, and she is a good Marxist, because last year, off of the catalyst event of the George Floyd death, they raised hundreds of millions of dollars for BLM. And is she out there serving the people? Oh, yeah, she's out there serving the people from one of her $10 million worth of residential property, because that's the way communism, that's the way socialism, that's the way Marxism works. There's always a small group of evil people that are at the top of the food chain, and everybody else is down there in misery. And why would anybody trust? And getting back to Canada, why would anybody trust that the same government that has been covering up these horrific crimes for years and is still actively covering them up? One of the clips that I played of Justin Trudeau, that was from 2018. And he's still saying the same thing today. He's basically saying, if you listen to him, we're going to blame everybody and just talk about it, and nobody will ever be brought to justice. And folks, I think I've gone long enough on this one. I'm hopeful that I can bring a couple of people on at some point in the future to really break down this UNDRIP category. And I just wanted to get this off my chest. There is nobody on earth that is beyond accountability. And if the Catholic Church had, what is the best way to say this? They need to be held accountable. And it's time to quit covering them up here in the U.S., here in Canada, there in Canada, anywhere. And folks, I believe that great awakening is coming. I believe that a great revival is coming, and I believe that this kind of stuff is going to be exposed. This is not going to be whitewashed over. The blood of those innocent victims cries out to Almighty God, and this facade. And think about the indigenous children that their exposure to Christianity was this. No. God's not going to have it. It's not going to have it. Okay, I'm into Rantland. I appreciate everybody that joined me this third time around. And until next time, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless the United States of America. And God bless those that are standing with us. You guys have a great day.